Hello there, I am Tom Chick, and you are here in my dining room, and in just a moment we're going to go over to my dining room table on today, March 30th, 2020. Before I continue on, before we head over to the table, I want to follow up on something that I think I was struggling to articulate yesterday. Times right now are very difficult, I think, for all of us. And I don't know about you guys, but as I am struggling to wrap my brain around what is happening, as I'm struggling to process it, I sometimes feel a little dissonant. It feels a little out of sorts when I engage in frivolity. I'm here at this table playing with toy mice. And a realization I sort of came to and that I tried to communicate, I think that it is important to allow that frivolity, not in spite of what's going on, not in spite of the difficulties and the stress that I think a lot of us are feeling. It's important to allow for that frivolity because of the difficulty that we're all dealing with. And to not let it feel dissonant, to not feel guilty about it, to not think, oh my God, I'm so dumb sitting here at this table playing with toy mice when the number of deaths have topped, when the president is talking about 100,000 deaths being successful, and I'm sitting here moving a toy mouse. Don't think of it that way. Think of it as your brain is processing this, part of processing it should be allowing for that frivolity. So that's what I was trying to get at yesterday, and it came out way gloomier than I intended. So pretend that yesterday I said what I just said right now. All right, it's March 30th. We're going to go play with some toy mice. Take a break. Join me here at the dining room table. We're going to be on the other side of the table because what I want to do today is explain to you with this deck of cards why I enjoy Aftermath in a way that I certainly didn't enjoy Stuffed Fables, because that was for babies, in a way I don't think I would have enjoyed Comonauts. These are all three games in the adventure book series from Plaid Hats. I want to explain what sets Aftermath apart, and not just the colony management stuff, which I've showed you the last few days, but the moment-to-moment gameplay, the stuff you're actually sitting down and doing when you are playing a mission. And it is all expressed in these cards. So to explain that to you, I need to show you the cards, I need to explain how they work, and then tomorrow I'm going to show you an actual mission. Actually, you know what? Tomorrow we will not be showing you a mission. That'll be the day after tomorrow. Tomorrow there's a special treat for Calendar Bear. So join me for that. But let's go to the dining room table right now and let's talk about some cards. Okay, the other adventure book games, Comonauts and Stuffed Fables, don't have these cards. Instead, they rely on dice. When it is a character's turn, they use dice to fuel their actions. And the number of pips rolled on the dice is basically how effective the action is. The Aftermath wants no part of that. It's like, no, we're not going to fool with dice. Although it actually does fool with dice. But Aftermath wants the basis of the game to be a deck of cards. And managing a deck of cards is a lot different, you don't need me to explain this to you, than managing dice. Because in a deck of cards, as you work your way through them, every card in here will happen. It is inevitable. This little one of strength will always come through as I'm working through the deck. If I roll dice that, for instance, has a one of strength on it, there's no guarantee I'll ever roll that. I could roll the dice 100 times and, on a d6, never get a 1. Unlikely, but possible. So I want to show you, here are the cards for Aftermath. There are basically 4 suits: defense, agility, intuition, and then this is strength. Each suit has 6 cards. There's a 3, a pair of 2s, and 3 1s. This right here is the foundation for the game's system. Each of these suits represents a skill, and it is used to do certain actions. However, we also there are white cards that are not wild. That's actually, I think, a common misperception when you play this game. But they can initiate an action for any of the attributes, any of the abilities. Abilities, skills, stats. I should look up the technical term here. But at any rate, the white cards are special. They do something different. And they also offset. There are black cards. And this is what the enemy uses. And it's also the game clock. And then finally, there's this fella. It's a calamity card. And you'll note it's got a cat jester on it. Because I guess to mice, cats are jokers. So this is the deck of cards. And by way of explaining how the game works, I want to show you this deck of cards in action. Okay, here are the characters in the game. You've seen these fellows before. This is Grumple. She's a guinea pig. She's a guinea pig. This right here is Messiah. Messiah is sort of the sniper. Here's Ringer. And here's Whisper, who's the ninja of the group. When you're playing the game, I play solitaire, play all four rodents. Generally, I think the game expects people to play it co-op where a different player has each character. And when it is your turn, or a particular character's turn, he or she draws his hand up to 5 cards. And then these 5 cards, which I didn't shuffle, these 5 cards are used for that character's action. And then we go to the next character to do an action with 5 cards. They begin by drawing their hand to 5 cards. Maybe they'll spend some of them. They'll be left with 1 card. Draw 5 cards. It comes back around. They've got 1 card, and they're only drawing 4. Using these 5 cards that you get, you do the different actions in the game. Let me give this a quick shuffle. Now, unlike a lot of games that involve miniatures moving around a map, you don't have an enemy turn every other turn. It's not like a character goes and then an enemy goes and character goes and then the bad guy minis move and attack you and then a character goes. Nope. You just don't have an enemy turn. No, skip it. Just do all your characters' turns. Just keep going. Except as you draw these black cards, they, as I mentioned, are kind of a game clock as well. They will build up and trigger an enemy turn. So you're going along and Grimple does something and then Messiah does something and then Ringer does something and maybe they're building up these black cards as they go and then you're expecting that Whisper is going to do something, but whoops, you draw another black card and now there's going to be an enemy turn. So the way that the flow of the game, the beat of as I do my actions and as actions are done to me by bad guys is nicely unpredictable. Now, instead of leaving these minis out, let me put the cards out to show you a little bit more about the game. There's Grumple, there's Messiah, there's Ringer's card, there's Whisper. I want to tell you about how the cards are used for actions. What are you going to do with those 5 cards that you draw into your hand? Generally, one of the most basic things you're going to do is move. How far can I move? Well, what's the number on the card you play? If you play a 2, you can move 2 spaces. If you play a 2 and a 3, you can move 5 spaces. One of the ways that the maps create difficult terrain or water that has to be crossed is they have colored lines. And in order to cross a colored line, the card that you play must include that color. So for instance, difficult terrain a lot of times is represented with a green line. If you want to cross a green line, you have to play a green card. With this card, it represents agility. I can move 2 spaces, and it can be freely across green lines. What if I don't get a green card in my hand? Well, then moving across a colored line is 3 points of any card. So the cards, that's one of the most basic uses, is getting around the little maps, moving your little mice. But the more common use, and I think the more complicated use and where a lot more gameplay is introduced is with this idea of skill tests. So each of the suits will have different skills and actions associated with it. This is strength. Strength is red. If you're going to melee punch someone, it is a strength test. If you're going to shoot someone with a little gun, or for instance, a toothpick crossbow, which is what Messiah has, that's an agility test. A test in this game has a difficulty rating. Let's say, for instance, that I want to shoot an enemy. And let's say that enemy's defense is 3. Pretty straightforward. Let's say I want to shoot that enemy with Messiah's toothpick crossbow. I need to reach or exceed the difficulty of the test, which is 3. Will this card do it? Nope. It would be a failed action. I can't even do it. What about these 2 cards? If the difficulty is 3, yeah, play a 2 and a 1. There. You've accomplished the test. Or have you? Because here is where I can't really say that the game has eschew. You know, I shouldn't have even tried to roll that word out. This is where the game has decided against relying on dice, but not entirely excluding them. This little 6-sided die right here, it goes from -2 to +3. Now you might be wondering, wait, it's a 6-sided die. The difference between -2 and +3 is 5. Well, this die has a 0. I'm telling you, math, complicated. So I have played 3 agility points to shoot the toothpick crossbow at an enemy that has a defense of 3. Now I roll this die, and if I then apply this to my cards, to what I've played, generally it's going to be a positive or a 0. There is, of course, a -1 and a -2 on here. Those will make me fail if I only played the cards sufficient to do the action. So there, I played a 2 and a 1. I rolled a -2. I failed to hit the target that I was shooting at. Oops. Now that's the way the most common skills work, but combat was actually a bad example because combat works a little differently. That's the way, for instance, see this light bulb intuition? This is how you search an area when you're scavenging. There's a scavenger token that has a difficulty on the back side of it, and that is what you need to play to flip the token over and earn whatever is on it. So these 2 food here, the difficulty is 2. Ringer gets a +2, as you can see here, on all of her intuition checks. If I were to play this card to initiate the action, I then add 2. That's 3 points applied to a difficulty 2, and I rolled and I got 4 points. I easily accomplished it. I flipped this over and I've now scavenged 2 food. But many of the checks are what are called opposed checks, and this is especially where combat comes into play. So my example of Messiah shooting the crossbow toothpick at an enemy is a bad example because it doesn't just involve this die. It also involves this black die, which again, it goes from +3 to -2. There's no difference in the numbers on these. It's just the color is different. This die is added to or subtracted from the actual difficulty. This die is added to or subtracted from the cards that I play. So therefore, if I am spending 3 points of green cards to shoot that crossbow at an enemy with a defense of 3, I can swing 5 points in either direction because of these 2 dice. So a lot of the card play is pretty straightforward because the 2 6-sided dice, you know, they fall into that parameter. The average you're going to get is a 0 or a +1, but it can stray up to 5 points either way. So there is some variability there, as well as, of course, in the cards that you draw that are dealt to you. But more importantly, what I want to show you here is as we're drawing our cards and we hit those black cards, oh, look how lucky I'm getting. Don't pretend that didn't happen. We know, I'll go ahead and show you this now. The calamity card will be unique to a given page that you are playing. On the information, remember the map is on the left, the information is on the right. Do I have that right? Yeah. On the information, one of the bits of information is, hey, what does the calamity card do in this location? So whenever you draw this, and remember, that's the difference between dice and cards, you will draw the calamity card at some point. You're going to work your way pretty quickly through this deck. The calamity card triggers something unique on that page. And I should say triggers it. It has a chance of triggering it because, again, it brings into play the dice. You actually roll a die and you add or subtract it to the amount of time you have spent on this mission so far. And then each page has a threshold where if you hit that number, it fires off the event. So what that means is you're inevitably going to hit the calamity each time you visit a page, but the longer your mission goes on, the more likely it is that that page's calamity will trigger. So, okay, I'm dealing cards. Who shuffled these? All right, and then one of these comes up. Let me show you how enemies work. So here are cards for different enemies. Here's a scrapper, which is an armored mouse. Here's a meekling, which is a meek mouse. They steal your stuff. Here is what's the other one? Oh yeah, the scorpions, which have toxin and have a ton of hit points. The cards show you a couple of bits of information. For instance, here's the difficulty to hit it. When I was talking about a 3 before, I don't have any 3s. A meekling's difficulty to hit is a 6. Now that's not easy to do. It's going to take a lot of cards or a character who has a weapon that adds to attacks or that has an innate ability to add to agility rolls. In addition, this is one of those games where every time you attack something, you don't then roll for damage. A successful attack, 1 point of damage. That's simple, that easy. In most cases, like this little mouse and this scrapper, they only have 1 hit point. 1 point of damage will remove the unit. Look at these stupid scorpions, 2 hit points. Relatively easy to hit. I mean, look how big it is. But you're going to have to do it twice in order to kill it, whereas these things fall with 1 hit. So when an encounter is generated in this game, it specifies one of the types of enemies. Each of these enemies will have 4 cards. 3 regular instances of that enemy. There are 3 scrappers. And there, by the way, I showed you the minis before. There aren't that many minis in this game. There aren't that many different enemies. So 3 scrappers and a scrapper leader. Generally, especially if you're playing 4 characters, you're going to shuffle all of these cards, and then you're going to make a column randomly of those enemies. So here you've got a column, and on a board that you'll see when I'm actually playing the game, this is called a threat column. And as you flip up these black cards, starting at the top of the column, you then take the card and you slip it underneath the enemy with the card showing, like so. This number now on this little chart here shows me what that character will do when he activates. And of course, these only go from 1 to 3. So there are a few different options, and that's how special behaviors are triggered. Things like the meekers stealing stuff from you. There are a few different things that different creatures will do. And as this column is filling up, as you're dealing more black cards, you are getting a sense for what sorts of actions will be taken against you, because you're going to keep drawing and playing cards until this column fills up. So I'm going along, I'm doing actions, I'm getting stuff done, maybe I'm even attacking enemies and killing them. At a certain point, I'm going to draw a black card that fills up the enemy column. And what now happens is that the enemies get a turn, finally. Starting at the top of the column, working your way down, each of them, based on the number tucked under the card, gets that action. And once you have done all of those enemy units' actions, these cards are taken away and put into the discard pile. And then the whole thing starts over again. As you draw black cards, remember there are 6 of these in the deck, and you're going to go through the deck probably multiple times. As you draw black cards, they fill up that column. But keep in mind, as we are killing these dudes and they're coming off the board, it gets easier and easier to fill up this column. In fact, one of the ways this game models fast creatures, like you run into roaches, is they're represented with only a single card, which means every time one of these black things gets flipped up, it activates the roach's card, because the roaches are represented by a bunch of tokens rather than the card or a miniature itself. So as things are killed, they become sort of more nimble, which then creates this kind of sub-game of, do I really want to kill a creature, or do I want to not attack it and let this empty out to buy myself more time? That, as you start playing this game, that might not be obvious, because once you kill all the enemies, by the way, you still put these into a threat column. And whenever that threat column hits 4 black cards, then based on the page you are playing, the instructions will tell you what to do when it fills up. Generally, this is something like advanced time, which, as we saw yesterday, causes bad things to happen back at the colony. Sometimes it'll have you draw a new encounter. Now, I want to show you one more thing with the card play that gives this game a lot of character interplay. And it involves each character's, where's Grumple? It involves each character's hand of 5 cards and the actions you can do when it is your turn. Of course, you draw your 5 cards at the beginning of your turn. You're sitting on 5 cards that you can use. If you drew a threat card, maybe fewer than 5. You're using them for actions. As you use them, they get put into a discard pile. One of the actions, and it's a fundamental part of Aftermath, one of the actions is called encourage. And this was part of the previous adventure book games as well, where you had dice. You could encourage another character by giving that character one of your dice. Maybe you had a colored die or a roll that another character really needs, so okay, give one of those characters 1 die. Now there's a limit on this. The limit here for encourage, you can give cards, if it's Ringer's turn, she can encourage any of these other characters by giving them her cards. Now the limit is, let's pretend again that it is Ringer's turn. You cannot give someone cards if it would give them 3 or more, if it would give them more than 3 cards. So in this case, Ringer cannot give Whisper either of these cards. Ringer could give Grumple one of them, at which point another card would exceed the limit of 3, or Ringer could give both of them to Messiah. So what you're doing as you're playing is not just looking at your hand of 5 cards and seeing what you can do with them. What you're doing as you play is you're looking at your hand of 5 cards and seeing what your whole party can do with them, which characters need them. Now, a corollary of this, and it's sort of one of the first things you'll learn as you're playing, it'll become quickly apparent, that as you are working through, if each character spends all of his or her cards, then each other character, you're drawing your 5 cards, and you're moving through the deck pretty quickly. Like, who shuffled this? And as you move through the deck quickly, these discarded black cards that fired off a column of enemies, they're getting shuffled back in the deck, and you're also moving through them quickly. What you do when you encourage is, if it is Whisper's turn, and if it's Ringer's turn, and she has cards, she knows that Whisper, when Whisper takes his turn, will be drawing 5 cards. So what she can do to slow the rate of card burn is give cards to Whisper. Now, Whisper will only draw 2 cards. And, will only draw 2. Oh my God! There, those are the cards that Whisper drew. At any rate, the point being that Whisper is moving more slowly through the deck. All of you are moving more slowly through the deck if you give some of your cards to someone else so that they have to draw fewer. And that's an important part of the card play in Aftermath. Now, all of this you'll see in action the day after tomorrow when I actually take you through a mission with these 4 folks. If you haven't seen this particular video, when I play a mission, it's just going to look like a lot of nonsense of cards being moved around. But having had the basics explained to you, when you see a mission, you'll have a sense for what I'm actually doing. So come on back day after tomorrow for that. Join me for the secret calendar bear surprise tomorrow. And most importantly, take care of yourselves. Have fun doing frivolous things. It's an important part of getting through this. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Cheers. Oh, shoot a monkey. Ugh. Whatever. You know what? I don't want you here, Chad. Get over there. All right.